Now, we'll move into cats in New Zealand, given Greg's set the standard, and I think in this job, you see some remarkable transitions, and Society for Protection of Cruelty to Animals has been one of them. And when I first came in, we had this philosophical difference about cats, and over 3 years we've actually come together where SPCA is owning this very issue that we want to as well. So this is how society changes, and New Zealand has a huge number of feral cats in our cities. We've had this difference over spay and release, and today we'll have Helen Beattie, who's president of the Companion Animal Vets branch of the Vet Association and a member of the National Cat Management Strategy Group, which has really been the impotence to change our whole thinking about feral cats in New Zealand. Kia ora.
Good afternoon. I think you're probably all slightly surprised to learn that I invited the crazy cat lady to talk at the Threatened Species Summit, but here I am. Just like to say I've sort of got this title not necessarily by choice, but by default through a process of probably opening my mouth one time too many. Anyway, it's become a passion. So I'm going to take you on a quick little run down the road. You may remain seated. So very quickly, this is who I am. Thank you for the introduction. I will just draw your attention to the last thing on that slide, which says I am not an expert. So by default, as I've just described, here I stand before you. So the National Cat Management Strategy Group came together. There was definitely a need. So there was this sort of groundswell of momentum about trying to address this issue of cats that we have in New Zealand. So we've got some key stakeholders that came and sat around that table: Morgan Foundation, New Zealand Veterinary Association, me as the Companion Animal Veterinarians representative, SPCA. We also had local government there too, and as you can see from that information, DOC and MPI sat as technical advisors. So we've been talking for 2.5 years now, and I'm probably thinking most of you are aware that we launched a strategy, quite a long document, not light bedtime reading, about September last year. We're all able to engage with what we'd put together as recommendations around that. So the bottom bit there is just really, as I said, why it came together. It's an enormously emotive topic, this cat thing, and there's just a recognition that actually there needs to be some form of national leadership and some solutions put out about how we're going to manage this. Piecemeal work, which is being done all over the country, is not necessarily the best way or the most effective way, and certainly not the most financially effective way to deal with this issue. Right, so the critters. I did wonder, Greg, whether you showed us that photo of that great big cat just to prove that Australia grows the biggest cats, because they were quite something. So we're talking about 1.1 million domestic cats, so those are cats in laps. 44% of households have 1 or 2 cats, as opposed to just under 30% with dogs. We don't have really hard and fast figures about stray cats and feral cats, and I think some of the information that Greg just delivered around feral cats in Australia is some of the holes in the knowledge we have here. We don't actually know specifically what the kill rates are. We've made estimates. We don't know how many feral cats there are exactly. There's a very wide range there with that figure, 2.4 to 14 million feral cats. The figure at the bottom there around those destroyed annually, that's what we know is happening within the context of stray cats. That doesn't include domestic cats, because that data is captured by veterinary clinics, and that's not part of what we're talking about here. But certainly there's an indication of the size of this problem, and that's only as I say, the cats that we know are being dealt with through rescue organisations, SPCA, and vet clinics who do euthanasia of stray animals. Any reason why that won't go? Yep, no, I've got that. Oh, now it is going. Just push it with more fierceness. Okay, so hopefully you're all familiar with the way cats are categorised in this country. So we've got domestic cats, or as I say, lap cats, stray cats, which is the ones that we see in and around the areas of human habitation. So by definition under the Code of Welfare, stray cats are reliant on humans in some way for resource to survive. And then we have the feral cat population, which lives in the bush or outside that area of human habitation and reliance on resource. They are, the reason I have arrows there, although you won't see feral cats unless you're going hunting and you're in the bush, is that essentially all of these animals obviously can interbreed if they're not desexed. And certainly by removing areas of high density on the extremities of urban areas, there will just be infilling and changing of those categories of cats as they move in and out of territorial zones. So what's the big issue? Quite a few of us probably quite like cats. I have a cat. There's a bunch of reasons. I don't need to go into all the details, but there's a bunch of reasons why we like cats and why they're good for us. The single biggest reason why people own a cat is for companionship, and there are lots of positive flow-on effects from that. So the problem that we have is, in my view, and I will say some of this is my view, that it's actually over all of the sectors or all of those groups of cats that we have issues. Not all companion cats are managed well, not all stray cats are managed well, some actually are. And then the feral cat issue, as Greg's alluded to, the damage they do on our native and vulnerable species. So there's an argument about the welfare of the stray cat. I'm not going to go into the details. You can argue that both ways. Actually, fundamentally, a lot of them seem to be reasonably happy. They live okay. They run lean. They're out there hunting for resource, but it's difficult to say that actually their welfare is significantly affected. So that's not necessarily a reason to manage them. There are health issues that come from cats, so the list there, most of which you'll all be familiar with. Then the nuisance stuff, which gets to be very difficult to deal with. I used the word trespass, and that was one of Gareth Morgan's big issues about how many trespassers there were every year by a cat in the neighbourhood. And if you don't like cats, that's a legitimate grievance. And the big one, predation. And again, as I've said, we don't have all of the information we need about this to be able to really address what the magnitude of this problem is. I can say significant, but actual details about the number of kills, we'd love someone to chuck money at that, and let's do some more research. So in New Zealand, they are our apex predator. Apart from us, nothing really takes them on, and that in itself is one of the significant issues regarding all cats, but particularly in the feral and stray cat arena. We know that predation rates are higher with feral cats. They're not specific. If it's out there, they will take what's available, so they're very generalist. And there is an argument about rodent and pest control, but I think in the bigger context, in the wider context of what we're talking about here, we have to, notwithstanding prey switching potentially, that's a very small, possibly positive benefit of them. But the other stuff, in my view, still, leans to wanting to control this better. So within our rural sector, we've got the toxoplasmosis issue, which affects ewe fertility, and obviously a significant cost there to our pastoral industries. Also zoonotic disease, and I touched on this earlier, but if cats are a nuisance, they are wandering and they're defecating in sandpits at the local childcare centre, then hookworm infestation, which can result in permanent blindness, is a significant risk. And then the nuisance issue. As I say, if you don't like cats, having them wander and having no ability to control or manage that through the law is very frustrating. Okay, so the biggest problem here probably is that there is no funding to fix it. Current laws make it very difficult. So except for feral cats, there's a lot of grey areas around what we have to do legally with managing stray cats. And there's a bunch of clunky bits around that. So if a stray cat comes into, for example, the SPCA, it's got to be held for 7 days before you're allowed to legally process it either way, whether that's to rehome it or to dispatch it. So that makes the management of these stray cats very difficult. As I've said, there has been a wind of change that resulted in this group coming together. We know we need more research, we need more knowledge, we need to be able to fix the holes in what we know to be able to build a more certain way forward to deal with this problem. I would put the question out there, 2050 predator-free New Zealand is great, but there is a gaping hole of not addressing cats in this. We've been told it's because it's too emotive. And I don't really buy that. Well, it is emotive, but I'm not sure that it's contentious. I think if we ask the general population about whether or not they would like there to be better assistance in how to manage this problem, my feeling is the vast majority of people would say yes. Now, that doesn't mean eliminating cats. That means managing cats to a much higher degree so that they don't do the damage they're doing currently. So that is a challenge I put forward. We need to engage the public with that. If it's about the fear of it being too emotive and damaging, let's get that information and figure out whether that's actually the case or not. So this is a very long-term plan. I think that's the other take-home message. This is about changing the culture of how we think about cats, how ownership looks, and what our expectations are around that. And I use the Dog Control Act as an example. Dog Control Act 1996, apparently, too young to remember, a bunch of people got quite upset about what was expected within that act, and now we just think it's normal. And I propose that that's going to be what we need to do with regard to cats and cat management. We do know something has to change. So this is not a good option, not working currently. We won't dwell on that. We need to eliminate that as a possibility and move on to this, so doing something. We have to be realistic. Destruction is going to be part of what's required in order to manage this, and all of the groups around the table are fluent with that idea. There's a bunch of options there around what management might look like, contentious issues. There's rafts of research I encourage you to get amongst. Education is critical. So this is about changing culture and how people think about cats and, as I said before, our expectation in the greatest sense. This is my one big idea. It's not really my idea, but I'm pretty keen to see it done. Audacious goal of 2020, that's not long. Let's get it done. I can't see a way of doing this without it. We need mandate from a national level to assist locally with getting this job done. At the moment, it just doesn't work. Everyone throws their hands in the air and nobody wants to deal with it. If there's one slide to remember, it was that one, 2020, let's do it. Okay, so what that kind of looks like. You can all read, but essentially these are some of the nubs of what we talked about around this table. Very much that it needs to be legislated nationally, but we'd also like there to be quite a lot of autonomy around how that's actually rolled out at a local level. And I know my Fanway is going to dive into some of the details about this shortly with what Wellington has done. But microchipping and registration of that microchip to assist with repatriation of cats that are captured is critical to that. That way, if they're not microchipped, we can assume they stray, and new legislation would allow for more rapid management of those cats. So early age neutering, breeding licences as ideas, curfews, cat containment, very challenging in the current climate that we exist within. But as I said, we have to think that this is about changing a culture. If you ask my kids, they'll say our next cat will be contained. It's just about changing the mindset. Just, little word, right? So then the ecologically sensitive areas, there needs to be specific management around those too. So your Zealandia, we have Orokonui Sanctuary in Dunedin. There's a different way that we need to manage those areas, in my view, which would mean if we are considering trapping, neutering and returning cats, then it's not into any of those areas where the spillover effect would hopefully be happening and bird life flourishing. So coming back to the finance thing again, if it's mandated, we would presume that, like the Dog Control Act, there is money that falls out of that system, because at the moment, as I said, everyone throws their hands in the air, there's no money in the pot to actually fix this problem. And we have to be realistic, and I've touched on this, it is emotive, and I understand that it upsets people, but at the end of the day, we just quite simply can't save every cat, and it's, in my view, it's not the right thing to do anyway. And a whole bunch of education, because that's what's going to change the culture. And we need to get that done at our grassroots level. So, as I said, my children, you can imagine having the crazy cat lady in the house, how they get hounded about this on a day-to-day basis. But all children need to be tortured the way mine are to engage with cats and think about cats and cat management in a different way. So utopia, potentially. There's actually a dog in there. That's another whole story. Or utopia, or utopia. Thank you.